on this episode of the Mad Rush podcast.
Just, it changed how I saw the world. It changed how I understood the world, being in Africa and being in a place that had so few resources. Water was limited, food was limited. We went into villages where sometimes we were the first white women that they had ever seen. And I think before then, I really believed that if you worked hard, you could do it. And that trip showed me just how much privilege that I lived my life with, and how much privilege so many of us live our lives with. And that sometimes you're starting from a place that it just doesn't matter how hard you work,
Welcome to the Mad Rush podcast. I'm Trisha Addix, the original sorority rush consultant. While the stories I have to share are nothing short of astonishing, this podcast goes beyond the wild client tales and sorority life. I'll be engaging with fascinating guests from both within and outside the Greek world, uncovering the surprising connections that bind us all together. Join me for a journey that's as entertaining as it is enlightening. Welcome to Mad Rush. So today I'm very excited to be joined by Jan Risher. We were just talking about this before we started recording. She was referred to me by our mutual friend, Stephanie November, who has said we would be friends. She's told me about Jan for years, and she's like, you're going to love her. Your audience is going to love her. You have to have her. So here we are. You guys and I am in for a super treat.
Well, thank you. My goodness. Stop.
Stop. So Jan is the Louisiana Culture Editor for George's Media. She writes 3 statewide columns a week and is the Baton Rouge Features Editor and is also editor of Louisiana Inspired and Louisiana Health. So I'm pretty sure if we need to know anything about Louisiana she's our gal.
Well, I might not know the answer, but hopefully I could figure out where to look for it. So it's been a pleasure, and how lucky are we who love our jobs? And I've had jobs I certainly didn't love, but this is not like work.
So do you write all day, every day? Is that what you do?
Well, I'm an editor too, so I do a lot of reading and a lot of planning. And planning has always been a strength, and so I take a different path than a lot of journalists and editors take, where I'm always looking about 3 months down the road at all of the different pieces due, and I like to have slots filled, and we can shuffle around. I play a lot of Tetris with different, publications, but always have something there. Even though I love to think on the spot, and I love to do stories that I turn around in a day, and I love for my reporters to do stories that they turn around in a day, but still that comfort that a plan provides, I think allows for a lot of creativity.
Oh, that's a really good point. Because I am so structured, but I'm also I crave creativity, and I feel like having a plan, I never really thought about it like that, but that's how I operate. And that's how I'm able to be creative, because I have a plan in place. And God love editors. So I am in the midst of writing a book. Well, that part's done, but the editors, gosh, God love you. I thought I could write, and I think I'm a decent writer, but oh my God, it's a gift to be able to do what you do.
Well, I love the writing part, but I really do enjoy the editing part. And the thing that's interesting about the writing a book part is you think the first time when you write it, oh my, I'm done.
Right. That is not the case.
That is not the case.
Yeah. So speaking of books, I want to get into yours, but Steph said I had to ask you, she said it would be relevant for this podcast about Kathy Curtis.
Oh, my sweet friend, Kathy Curtis. Kathy Curtis was my college roommate, And she and I, our lives have seemingly gone in very different paths in the multiple decades since we both graduated from Mississippi State University. Go Dogs.
Oh, I didn't know you went to Mississippi State. Do you know who Ellen Skrmetti is, the comedian?
I do, yeah.
She was on my podcast, and she's a good friend of mine now. And my son, the son I was telling you about that Pete, brought us to the football game, he went to Ole Miss. So we have a bit of a rivalry. But I interrupted you, but I don't think I knew that you went to Mississippi State.
Yeah, went to Mississippi State. And by the way, I think Ellen is hysterical.
Yeah, she's awesome. She's so funny. I've seen her live too. She's great.
So Kathy is, she and her husband became missionaries with Southern Baptist, and they ended up living in Burkina Faso, a country in West Africa. It's generally considered the third poorest country in the world. Now, and they were there for 12 years in the 90s and early 2000s. Now it's been taken over by coup. It's not safe to be there. But I went to visit her while she was there. And going to West Africa radically changed my perspective on the world, because I had just spent a year teaching English in Slovakia. I got there when the country was 11 days old in 1993, and it had just split from the Czech Republic, and I taught English in the northeastern border area near Ukraine and right on the Polish border. And it was just this magical year. I mean, I felt like Julie Andrews running through the hills and drapery dresses, that kind of thing.
Were you married at this point?
No, my husband had asked me to marry him, and I said, hold that thought.
Really?
I just knew that I needed to go have this big experience, big adventure, and I am so grateful. And in full disclosure, I will say I had been married to my high school sweetheart previously, and we had gotten a divorce several years, 4 or 5 years earlier, and I'd been dating my eventual husband for a couple of years, and he asked me to marry him, and I was 27, and I just knew that I needed this big adventure before I got married again.
That's cool that you knew that about yourself. I was begging for a ring.
But anyway, I went to Africa to visit Kathy, and just, it changed how I saw the world. It changed how I understood the world, being in Africa and being in a place that had so few resources. Water was limited, food was limited. We went into villages where sometimes we were the first white women that they had ever seen. And I think before then, I really believed that if you worked hard, you could do it.
Right.
And that trip showed me just how much privilege that I lived my life with, and how much privilege so many of us live our lives with. And that sometimes you're starting from a place that it just doesn't matter how hard you work,
Yes.
Kathy lived there for 12 years and just really made the absolute most of it. In fact, tomorrow night I'm having a dinner party, and I am preparing leek lasagna, which is a recipe that Kathy found on a French pasta box when she was living in Burkina Faso. So she's a huge part of my life, even still.
That's so, one, I want that recipe. And two, I came to a similar, I didn't go to Africa for it. I am nowhere near as well traveled as you are, but I came to a similar thought. I don't know, I guess it was about 15 years ago. And I was listening to a bunch of people talk, and they were talking about how hard they had worked, and they were very, very hard workers, but they did not seem to understand that their beginning was different. Their starting point was different. And I'm not being critical of them, but it was like this moment for me where I was like, wait a minute. Yeah, we're all really hard workers, but even if we had student loans or whatever, we still, this group I'm talking about, our starting point was different than so many people. And that, I think, was a moment where I was like, for me, sort of the same thing. I was like, wait a minute, I get to do this. And, at the time I wasn't working in a job that I loved as much as working for myself, clearly, but that's also a huge privilege. But I remember that was a big gratitude switch for me and gave me some perspective. But so where is Kathy now?
Kathy is in Starkville, Mississippi.
No way.
Yeah. In fact, she works for Mississippi State, and she's one of the people who works with international education programs, and she has spent a lot of time in Morocco and Uzbekistan and a couple of other countries developing over the last several years. She's helped develop vocational education programs.
Wow. So one of my very favorite humans, he recently passed away. His name was Bo Cooper, but biggest Mississippi State fan in the world. And I actually his son just got engaged, and I just got today a text from his wife saying they're actually getting married in Fairhope, Alabama. Have you been to Fairhope?
I have. I love
this
Fairhope.
hotel that we're staying is insane. I was like, dang, what is Fairhope? But anyway, he always called it Stark Vegas. And yeah, anyway, I like to throw his name in there whenever I can, because I want his wife and his family to know that I think about him all the time. And I don't hate Mississippi State anymore because he's not here to argue with about it. So.
Well, it's hard to hate Mississippi State because they're having such a difficult time, at least for me. I mean, I am always for the underdog. And, at this point in life, I've come to grips with what an underdog Mississippi State is. Don't come at things with very high expectations anymore.
That's good advice. All right, so
especially after living in Baton Rouge.
Baton Rouge. Some of my favorite clients went to LSU, and I had a podcast episode. One of my dear friends from growing up, her daughter went to LSU and went through Rush, and it was just this whole different, like, they're from Charlotte, North Carolina, and we talked about the podcast, like just the different cultures.
Right.
It was such a culture shock for her. So speaking of, I want to hear. You got to give me a Louisiana exploit. So what are some of the, I think I have the keyword mermaid from Stephanie.
Well, I will. Before I tell you the mermaid story, I'm at the newspaper right now. I'm in our studio where we produce all of the LSU newspaper sports stuff. So I just came with a solid black background. But so one of my columns every week, I go out and I do an adventure. Like, as I left my desk to come in here for this interview, I was working on a story about a blacksmithing class that I took 2 weeks ago, where I made 3 nails and a bottle opener by working in a forge and getting iron more than 800 degrees hot, and then using a hammer. And like, my arm was so sore the day after I did this that I could barely lift my Yeti. I mean, so I go out and I do some really interesting things.
That is super cool. Did you like it?
I loved blacksmithing.
Yeah, it sounds, I never thought about it before now, but that sounds really cool.
It was incredibly, just how malleable something like iron is. I mean, there's so many metaphors. As a writer, I think a lot about metaphors, and just the whole experience of blacksmithing was full of them. And I learned it's also the origin of so many sayings, like too many irons in the fire makes the fire cool, and strike while the iron is hot. If you don't, you're just working so much harder. And there were many others. But blacksmithing, I will say, is a whole lot more fun than mermaiding, and a whole lot easier, in fact. But the Audubon Aquarium in New Orleans had some traveling mermaids who came and swam in their aquariums, and they invited me to come and be a mermaid with these traveling mermaids.
I'm going to interrupt her if y'all can see my face right now. All right, continue.
And I thought, well, that'll be fun. Stephanie actually ended up going with me that day. And, there were just some things. I generally say yes. That's kind of
clearly.
It's not even a motto of life. It's just like, that's just what I do. I didn't think through a couple of things about the mermaids. Number one, have you ever put on a scuba outfit?
I've tried. to put on a wetsuit once. And
Yeah, a wetsuit. Thank you very much.
It was like putting sausage back in a casing. It was not a good thing.
Okay. Well, a mermaid outfit is actually made of silicone. And I was trying to put on the mermaid monofin. I've learned lots of words.
I was going to say, there you go.
Yes. On this little floating dock in the aquarium, which was 30 feet deep.
Well, that's kind of scary.
Oh, it was incredibly scary. And so Mermaid Ina, that was my helper, she was trying to help me pull on this mermaid monofin on this tiny little, probably 5 foot by 5 foot floating dock with all of these fish swimming around.
Like actual fish?
It was a real aquarium. I mean, like there were people in the aquarium walking. You could see them down below because again, we were at the top of the water, which was 30 feet deep. And it's also, the monotail whale weighs 50 pounds.
Wait, was that so scary? Did you think you were going to...
I thought I was going to die.
Yeah, you did.
Oh, I didn't even mention that they have silicone scallop to wear like Little Mermaid, like Ariel, you know. At the whole time I was getting ready, I thought that they were going to make me get in this water, and I knew that there was no place to stand up. And I was like, I might drown, and I'm going to have to be really embarrassed and tell these people I cannot get in the water because I'm afraid I'm going to die.
Yeah.
And anyway, after I finally got it on, I say to her about getting in the water. And she said, "Oh, we can't do that." And then I was able to relax.
Jesus.
But it was really an interesting experience. I was able to put my monofin over the edge, and I was able to move my feet back and forth in the water, and it was very easy to move in the water, unlike the beached whale syndrome on land. So
I still think that would have been terrifying, but that is wow.
It was really, it's all interesting. You just learn a lot of new things and you roll with it.
So do you do stuff like that like every week?
Every week. Every Tuesday I write an article about what experiences I go out and do. I've only been doing this since the 1st of October.
Oh, so it's recent.
I've written a weekly Sunday column every single Sunday since February of 2002. So,
wow.
That's like 1,000 plus columns. But in October, I started writing 3 columns a week. One of them is this experience thing. And the third one is readers send in their favorite recipes. I'm a big cook. And so readers send in their signature dishes. And I then make the signature dish, and I talk to them about it and where they got it, and I share it, and I share my results. That's every Thursday.
So do you have a favorite one of those that you've done recently?
Amazingly enough, I would say there have been lots of really good ones. I made some meatballs that a 97-year-old woman gave me the recipe for.
Wow.
And they were great. But
so what makes, I didn't mean to interrupt you, what makes a meatball unique?
This is fascinating. This one had a quote-unquote secret ingredient, and the ingredient was, meatballs. You
right.
Put in the meat, you put in the breadcrumbs, you put in what other seasonings. But for this recipe, you also put in more than 2 cups of water. So you put in a little water and you squish it around. You put in a little water and you squish it around until you get all that water in there. And just from a science perspective, eventually what happens is it combines with all those bread crumbs, and so it expands. And then you fry these meatballs in oil. And so you've got this crunchy exterior with a soft interior, and then you put them in the red sauce.
Okay, so for this Mad Rush sorority podcast, I now need a leek lasagna. I need a leek lasagna recipe, and I need that meatball recipe.
Fortunately, I've written about them both. So
I was going to say, and
yours.
It's online. It's online,
That's right?
I
That's
bet.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So speaking of food, so one of the things that Stephanie taught me, and that we say all the time, like if one of us something's going wrong, or I mean, from big stuff to little stuff, she's always like, I'm coming running with a casserole. And we say that all the time. And, you know, if I'm having a bad day, she's like, do I need to come running with a casserole? And I'm like, well, maybe, but I'm not there yet. So, and then afterwards, if we don't know about something, she's like, oh, I would have come running with a casserole. Go ahead.
Did she tell you about the podcast?
Yes, I'm prompting. So talk to me about that.
So, and unfortunately, we stopped doing the virtual casserole, was the name of my podcast. We did it for about a year, but we were both in that phase of life where we had children who were juniors and seniors in high school and college freshmen, and it was just, too much. But I loved doing the virtual casserole, and in the same theme is why we named it that. It's like, if I can't bring you a casserole today, here is a virtual casserole to help your life be better. And my co-host was my dear friend from Mississippi State, Linda Halfacre Ware, and it was just fun. We gave out virtual yellow roses every week to people who did wonderful things. We gave out pecan pies virtually every week. It was just fun. I'm a storyteller. Linda is one of the funniest people I know. And we had a lot of fun doing it and may do it again.
That's a really cool idea. And I like the idea of virtually. I might steal that. I tend to, when I talk to interesting people, I tend to steal their ideas and make them and pretend like they're mine. So
that's what art's all about.
I was going to tell you about this new idea I had to give out. I'm just kidding. So, do you sleep is the question.
I am a sound sleeper. I sleep. In fact, my phone will tell you tell us how many hours we sleep. I sleep on average every night about 7.5 hours.
Well, I don't know how you get everything done, but this leads me to your book. Now, y'all, I'm so excited about this book. And I am sure with all you have going on, you haven't had time to listen to this podcast, nor maybe the inclination it doesn't. But the thing I talk about in my day-to-day life with my job and with our clients that we work for, and it's what just gets me out of bed in the morning, is helping people make connections. And to do that, I feel like you need to work on your conversation skills. I always tell people when they're preparing for Rush that it's not an interview. You have to know how to listen and interact. And so talk to me, y'all. I've got the book right here. It is Q of the D, question of the day, encouraging conversation and connection, which for those of you who do listen to this podcast all the time, I literally use that word connection 25 times every time. So I was really excited when Stephanie called me and she's like, oh my gosh, my friend Jan, you have to have her on your podcast. She's written this book. And I have to tell you, this is also, I'm stealing a lot of things from the book. I'm not going to lie.
Steal away, because I think that's why I did the book. People who have written books understand that very few people actually make money from books.
Yeah.
And this is my third book. And the reason why I wrote it is my family has been asking a question of the day and sharing our highlights of the day at dinner every night since our daughters were very young, and our older daughter now is 27. And they know how to have a conversation. Whoever comes to our home for dinner, we have notebooks. And the reason why I made this a book is that act of writing down your highlight of the day, that act of writing down the answer to your question of all the pictures of you, is there one you like most? Is there? I'm asking you now. Is there a picture of you that you like most?
Yes. It's going to make me cry, but I'm holding my son. I'm fatter than I've ever been in my life. Well, probably not, but like he was just born and he was on my chest. And I remember thinking, it's just one of my favorite pictures ever. Yeah. So here I am crying. Whoa, geez, Jan. And I put on makeup today. But yeah, it's probably the least flattering picture. It's a side view. And, you know, I've been pregnant and overweight and all the things. And it's a side view of me. But I just love it so much because there's so much trust in it.
Yeah. So this book is a literal question for every day of the year. And there are other books out there like this, and we have used them, and I think that they are good. But after using them for several years, I thought, I bet I could come up with my own questions. And, you know, as a journalist for a long time, I think a lot about questions and the best way to ask questions. And sometimes that requires some thought. I will say that just in terms of your audience. You know, be thoughtful about your questions, but don't edit yourself too much. Don't edit yourself to the point of paralysis.
Right.
And this book has 365 questions in it, maybe 366, because I think I did one for February the 29th. And the vast majority of them could be questions that you could just use in your arsenal. And I genuinely, I pray that people will do this, because I worry sometimes about, you know, I'm a huge fan of technology. I'm a huge fan of all things digital. But I do think that there is some loss of human connection that goes with too much technology. And I believe sometimes that questions are the answer.
Oh, that's amazing. And I agree. And I wrote down a couple of, or a few of my favorite. I'm gonna put you on the spot. But I agree. And I think that sometimes people get so worried about saying the right thing and that they don't say anything. And then there's dead air, which isn't always a bad thing. But what I always try to tell my clients, and what I really believe is the way to make a connection, is to ask questions and then really listen to the answer. And I say that for Rush too, which is a pretty superficial process. And it's something that, you know, people get all worked up about saying the right things, but I kind of say the opposite to them. I'm like, I get asked all the time, all right, what am I going to be asked this round? What should I say? I'm going to practice my answer. And I'm like, you cannot do that. You have to take a breath. You've done all the preparation, right? So you know that you're appropriately dressed. So you don't need to be thinking about that. You know that you are in the right place, the right time, and it's your job to try to connect and find your people. And the way to do that is to ask questions and then listen to the answers and then converse based on the answers.
And be sincere.
Yes. Oh, that's
the whole ticket.
Yes.
Tell the truth. That's what I coach a lot of high school students who are writing their college admissions essays. I do that on the side as well.
Oh, wow.
I take a limited number of kids every summer that I work with. And
so you take them after their junior year?
After their junior year,
gotcha,
rising seniors.
Uh-huh.
And the tips that I give them are, be specific, be honest, and use this opportunity to genuinely tell your story. This is your one shot. This is it.
I'm writing this down, y'all.
Yeah.
I'm writing as fast as I can.
Because everybody can tell a similar story. Everybody can tell about their accolades. But this is not the opportunity for that. So.
That's great advice. And it goes, I really feel like, and again, I'm really not trying to make this all about Rush, but like if you're going to find a genuine connection, you have to be your genuine self. You have to be
vulnerable.
Yes. And you have to be able to say what you're honestly feeling. I mean, obviously there's parameters to that. You don't, say, well, I mean, you can say you're scared shitless, whatever. But I think that's great advice. So y'all be sincere, specific, honest, and tell your story, because you're the only one who can do that.
You are it.
You are it. All right. So I'm going to give Jan a couple questions from her book. So I can answer this one right off the bat. When did you cry last?
Oh, when did I cry last? Oh, you know what? Whew. We were in Mexico City last week on vacation, and we went to the Zocalo. And the Zocalo is like their equivalent of the National Mall. If you think about the flag of Mexico, it's got an eagle eating a snake on a cactus.
Okay.
That's what the emblem is on the Mexican flag. And that's the emblem of Mexico because when the Aztecs were looking for a place to build their city, their gods told them to wander around until you find an eagle on a cactus eating a snake. And they found this in the middle of what was a small island swamp, and they ultimately it all got filled in, and that's how Mexico City came to be where it is, because way back in the Aztec day. And so now where this giant national flag is where that cactus was. Isn't that great?
That's really cool.
And so my husband is from Mexico originally, but he had never been to Mexico City. And the night we got to Mexico City, we went to the Zocalo. And it's the most democratic place in the whole country, which is a rather stratified country.
Wait, what's stratified? I'm sorry. Showing my ignorance.
There's a lot of layers of society there.
Gotcha. Okay.
It's not as fluid in terms of movement in society as the U.S. is.
Gotcha.
And so there was that day a protest for saving whales. And it was all of these, high school and college-age kids walking around the Zocalo with inflatable whales and signs. And this one guy had a sign that said, "I am looking for a crazy person who will help me in this fight."
Oh, wow.
And I wanted to take a picture of the sign because it said in Spanish, "I'm looking for crazy people," I just wanted to picture that sign, but he saw me, and so I started talking to him. And I said, "So tell me about your sign." And he spoke so sincerely about this hard fight that he was up against. He felt like he was responsible to help save these whales. And I'm not even talking about what the topic was.
Right.
But his sincerity and his passion and his vulnerability in that moment, it was all, and I just wanted to go, your mother must be so proud of you.
Yeah.
But it was all I could do to hold it together. And so when he walked away, I just had like these tears. And I was with my husband, and the Mexican flag was waving. It was just this kind of moment that encapsulated a lot.
Yeah, that's super
that was
cool.
The last time I cried.
Okay, I'm crying again, Jan.
Me too.
What's wrong with you? I'm crying on my podcast. All right, we're going to do something that's not going to make us cry. Well, no, that's going to make us cry. What friendship surprised you in a good way?
Friendship surprised me in a good way. Well, I did a program here in Louisiana a couple of years ago. One thing that I will say, and this is great advice for your audience in particular, is I think part of my success in life, and I'm not saying that I've had this abundance of success, but, I'm living a very happy life. And I think one of the reasons why is I've always been willing to look for and apply for things, even when I didn't think I might be the one who would win or get it.
Oh, that's good.
And so as an adult, I've continued to do that. And so I've ended up winning all these fellowships. And, to go different places and do different cool things. So apply for things, look for them, apply for things.
So wait, can you tell me a little bit more about that? So I know what a fellowship is, but like, what do you mean you've applied for fellowships? I mean, and how do you have the time? I'm really confused about that.
Well, I'm quick, and I'm a quick writer.
Right.
And so that saves a lot of time. But I'm a good researcher. And so, and I don't tarry a lot. Like,
right.
I make a decision and I do it. Sometimes it's not the right thing to do. So there are consequences occasionally. But, like I applied way back in 2005 or 6, I applied for an international journalism fellowship. And to do that, you just had to come up with an idea of a place in the world that your community had a connection with. And the tsunami had just happened in in the Pacific with Thailand and Sri Lanka and all that. And we had just had Katrina on the Gulf Coast.
Oh, wow.
And so I thought I could go to Thailand. I've never been to Thailand. And I could compare how they're recovering from the tsunami to how we are recovering from Katrina. So I wrote up this little paragraph and sent it in. And 6 months later, I was on a plane to Bangkok and spent 3 weeks in Thailand going to all these places, seeing how they're recovering. And then came home and wrote a 16-page section with photographs on telling that story.
That's a very brilliant correlation and something that only you uniquely could think of and do because you were living in Louisiana.
Right. And then I won a fellowship to Brush Creek's Ranch in Wyoming. It was just an artist fellowship, and they picked visual artists, musical composers and artists, and writers. And for a month, they give you a cabin and a studio and all the food, and your only responsibility is to create art.
Whoa. That's called Brush Creek. Is that what it's there for, or is it?
There are a lot of fellowships like that out there. And that one I don't think is actually in existence anymore. I won it. I think COVID may have closed it down, but I won it in 2019, the year before COVID. So
apply
for things. Just apply for things.
Also wrote that down just so y'all know and circled it. Mm-hmm. Okay, so what friendship surprised you in a good way?
So what friendship surprised me in a good way was I also applied for this program called Leadership Louisiana, where they pick, I think, 52 people every year, and you meet 6 times, and they're from all over the state. They're, leaders across the state. And I met a lady there the first night of the first meeting, and I was like, I don't know if we'll be friends or not. And we've turned out to be incredible friends. She lives here in Baton Rouge. When I moved to Baton Rouge, because I've only lived in Baton Rouge for 3 years, I moved here from Lafayette. That friendship and the other friendships from people I made from that fellowship totally changed our lives because we had this instant friend group, and that made an incredible difference.
Yeah, it makes a difference especially for a transition like that.
Right.
So it's all about finding your people.
Yeah, and there's a lot of people who I became friends with, but I was speaking specifically of Sarah Kleinpeter. And Sarah is a Rush girl, and she has made a positive difference in my life.
That's cool. I love that so much. And whenever there have been a few times, one of them is later today, I knew that I would find a connection with you because of Stephanie, but I have someone, somehow I was drawn to her, and on paper, we are completely different. I mean, just not different, but just I don't really see many, but somehow I was drawn to say, well, I want you to be on my podcast because I think you're going to be. So I'm interested to see. And I think if you're open to it, it doesn't really matter where you find these connections, but they're so important. And that's another piece of advice. Be open to your experiences and your people.
Completely. Have you ever read those 34 questions that could lead to falling in love with someone?
I'm writing that down.
I can send you a link if you don't find it. I've written about it some too, but it's very well documented. New York Times did a thing, and it's 34 questions, and they progressively get deeper and deeper. And the point of the questions is almost anyone can, and I don't mean fall in love romantically, but
Right.
almost anyone can fall in love with someone else if these two people are willing to be there for each other and willing to expose themselves. Now, we're certainly not going to like every person,
Right.
but we can find ways to love people.
Yeah, I love that. That's a beautiful thing. I've written that down too because I really want to explore that some more. I'm so glad that you're here. All right, so I got to ask you my question of the day. So Bama Rush Talk popularized the hashtag OOTD outfit of the day. For Mad Rush, I am repurposing hashtag OOTD into observation of the day, which incidentally was Stephanie's idea. When I told her I was doing this podcast, she called me and she said, you need to do hashtag observation of the day with your guests. So you are answering what was originally Stephanie's idea. So what is your hashtag observation of the day?
Well, this is a funny one, but I really like jewelry. And for whatever reason this morning, I forgot to put on my necklace. And I didn't know if this podcast was going to be only audio or video and audio. And I went around the whole newsroom going, does anybody have a necklace? Does anybody have a necklace?
Wait, do you have one?
No one had a necklace.
Oh my gosh, now I see your necklace. I actually was looking at that earlier and I was like, oh, I love her necklace, y'all. Okay, wait, you got to say what it is. So, and then your observation.
Okay, so no one had a necklace, no one had a scarf, no one had anything. And so I had this little magnetic thing of really pretty silver, not real silver, paper clips. And so I just strung silver paper clips together and made a necklace.
That is and like the paperclip chain is a thing.
I know, the paperclip. I have a necklace that's a paperclip chain. It's just not real paperclips. This, on the other hand, this is real paperclips.
I love that.
I think that my observation of the day is just that reminder, like to look around and see what's there and see if you can find a way to make it work.
That is awesome. I love that so much. And I think I'm going to steal that too. I'm going to tell all my clients to make paperclip necklaces if they forget their jewelry. And that happens a lot.
Because on camera, it looks fine, doesn't it?
I literally, when we first started talking, I was like, oh, I love her necklace. And y'all, I mean, that's awesome. That's good. All right. So for more wisdom and funny stories, where can listeners find you? And then I'm going to tell them about your book, where to get it.
I am on Instagram, just Jan Risher. It's my Jan Risher. And so please follow me there. It is not an official corporate-y kind of Instagram. It is about my life largely and my observations. And I love to take pictures. So follow us along.
That is awesome. Thank you so much for being here. I knew I was going to have a blast, but I think you're really, really amazing. And y'all get her book. It's 366 questions. I thought that makes sense. February 29th, because you don't know what year it's going to be. Question of the Day by Jan Risher, and that's Risher. I got it on Amazon. It was the first one that popped up. So thank you for being here. And go Tigers. No, wait. You're the Super Bowl's there this weekend. Right. So I gotta go for the all the old Georgia Bulldogs that are playing for Philadelphia. So
okay, all right. Well, just be safe, everybody.
Yes, exactly. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity. Best of luck.
Thank you. Welcome to Time Out with Trisha. Because can you really give advice if you don't speak about yourself in the third person? I don't think so. This is exactly how I speak to my clients, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So listen to me. I know what I'm talking about. Now let's get into it. Okay, this is a perfect timeout for today's episode with Jan Risher because she wrote the Question of the Day book. So what I want you to do is begin your journey to college with intention. And you need to know your why. And so I want you to answer these questions before you start preparing for Rush, before you start doing anything. It'll help you achieve your goal of joining a sorority with intention, and it'll help you identify what makes you you so you can highlight your strengths and address your weaknesses before you go. So here are your questions. Put on your noise canceling headphones and write these down and answer them. Number 1, why do you want to be in a sorority? Number 2, what brings you joy on a daily basis? For me, it's walking and spending time with my family. What are the 5 things you value most? Number 4, what do you value in your friends? Number 5, what would your friends say is your biggest strength and your biggest weakness? What are the ways people have most often described your personality? And what are you most proud of? Like I said, you're going to use this information to move with intention, and it means that you're going to work on your weaknesses and try to amplify your strengths. You're going to apply this concept to every step of this process, from prep through rush rounds. And that's it for Time Out with Trisha. We'll see you on another episode of the Mad Rush Podcast. Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Mad Rush Podcast. If you are enjoying this podcast, please consider leaving us a 5-star review. For additional Rush tips, updates, and more, please follow me on Instagram at Rush with Confidence. If you would like to reach out to us, or for more information, please email info@madrushpod.com. This podcast is produced by Collier Landry and Don't Touch My Radio. Copyright Trisha Adams.